What you will see today is how Xbox game studios are harnessing their passions to bring their dreams to life. These games will look and play best on Xbox Series X, delivering unmatched fidelity, performance, precision, and immersion. And we've designed the most consistently powerful next-generation console. And we've built state-of-the-art platform technology to allow every developer to realize their full vision.
But at what cost, Phil? But at what cost? All joking aside, Xbox have now stepped up to the plate and joined Sony by showing off the best they can muster on the next generation hardware for the Series X. And unfortunately, I'm not going to beat around the bush, it wasn't a good showing. Generally, I was pretty disappointed, not because of the games on show, because of the amount of CGI trailers. That was my biggest takeaway, and it takes me right back to E3s of 2014, 15, 16. Just stop showing CGI trailers. I tweeted about this at the time. It's just disappointing. Half of the games here were either in-engine or CGI trailers made from a completely outsourced company. I've moaned about this all the time. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't show anything, and it starts the whole thing off as a negative for me. And that's the biggest issue I've got with the entire show. I know this sounds like a real negative start, but I was really looking forward to seeing some great games, some real great franchises from the team, and some actual gameplay, or at least real-time cinematic moments from the new hardware. And it always shows that, you know, a corporation or a company isn't ready to show something when they rely on using these kind of elements and not real gameplay. That's disappointing. Now, let's be honest, Sony had a few moments where they didn't show off enough gameplay as well, but it wasn't like this. Everything in the show was running on the PS5. They announced that right at the beginning. The other takeaway from here is everything was not running on a Series X. That's not a good showing when you're a few months out from launch. You know, the biggest game there, Halo, the one I'll touch on in a moment, was running on a PC. It wasn't even running on an Xbox Series X. It wasn't even running on an Xbox One X. I mean, it shows a game in the worst light when you can't run it on a console that's months from launch. That's not a good start. So I've got the negative out of the way. The negative was there wasn't really much games to show here. There wasn't anything tangible that really showed off what was possible or is possible on this great piece of hardware that Microsoft have made, but they're not quite ready for prime time viewing yet. That's what my biggest takeaway was, and I'm sure many people's biggest takeaway was Microsoft are a little bit behind the curve when it comes to launching their games. And I've covered this before. This is exactly what I was saying about Microsoft concentrating on this cross-generation period and removing generations, because they kind of have to, because they're not really ready to ship games that are going to use the hardware and utilize it better. And that means we're going to see a long period of cross-generation titles. And that brings us perfectly onto the big game that was shown at the show, and that's obviously Halo Infinite. Had a great gameplay presentation, exactly what you would want to do, and it was exactly what the PS5 reveal lacked. It didn't have a full 9-10 minute demonstration of a brand spanking new game from beginning to end. That's probably coming in August, but that's what we're looking forward to seeing when we get our hands on these new consoles. The problem with the Halo demo was it really kind of laughs in the face of what they've been announcing leading up to the release of the Series X and Halo Infinite. Now, we all knew, and I said this years ago, Halo Infinite is all designed around being a perpetual release. It's going to be out there, and then it's going to be added to, evolve, online play, updates. They even said they're going to add a ray tracing patch. A little bit of a weird one when you announce you're going to release a ray tracing patch post-launch when your game gets some heavy criticism for its visual quality. Now, there's lots of reasons why it's got issues with its visuals, with its lighting, with its shadows, with its flatness, and all that kind of stuff. But the general issue is one single issue with the Halo demonstration, and that's really that it's not a new engine. You know, they mentioned the fact that this is the slipspace engine they've been working on. They're trying to improve it for the next generation. They built it from the ground up, and PR speak is PR speak. I've said this before. I said this about the new COD engine when it was previously announced it was going to be a brand spanking new engine, and it wasn't a brand spanking new engine. I said it wasn't a brand spanking new engine, and then they come out later on and said it's not. It's a updated engine with additional features, and that's standard. That's what you should do. Naughty Dog famously did that when they moved to the PS3, and they should never have done that. They admitted themselves it was the biggest mistake they made. You chuck the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. So there's nothing wrong with updating an engine. And there's nothing wrong with creating a brand new engine. Both those are perfectly valid solutions. You just need to have the time, resource and effort to create from scratch if that's what you're going to do. But there is something wrong when you announce you've massively updated it, and when the evidence keeps telling you time and time again, and as I covered with the Halo Infinite original reveal when they showed the gameplay cinematic from E3 last year, that it's not next generation. This isn't a brand new engine. This isn't a drastically improved engine. And in actual fact, in some ways, it doesn't look as good as the original in-engine demonstration they showed a couple of years ago. Fundamentally, there's no movement in the foliage. That's the biggest thing that stands out. It's a flat, static, barren world that doesn't move, that doesn't have any kind of animation, and that's systemic of the Halo engines over the years. But if you look back at the original Slipspace demonstration, you see the grass is flowing, the trees are moving, there's movement in the demonstration, there's sand blowing around, there's animals running in the background, there's that whole strive towards making a better, more realistic, more organic looking world. And this demonstration doesn't show that. It doesn't show that at all. It's an open world game. You've got free to go around and do your missions as you want to do. It's completely dynamic. You can see there's dynamic lighting in there, so it's got an image-based lighting system based on its environment. That's not new. Every bloody game uses that for the past 10 years. It's not new at all. It doesn't limit you. Having an open world game, having real-time lighting, having image-based lighting, all of those things don't limit you, and ray tracing won't fix it. It's as if to say that no game can look good and have nice lighting if it doesn't have ray tracing. It's just a silly comment. I don't know why they've done it. I don't know why they've said it, other than desperately trying to minimise the damage from what's coming out of it. But realistically, I'm not going to spend time on this, and I will do a whole video on it if people want me to, if they want me to get into it. But let me just touch on some of the points that stand out quite quickly, just watching the stream at the time. And it's why I didn't talk about the game, because I just couldn't be bothered with the arguments that people would get on when you mention things at the time. But there's no movement. Like I say, the trees don't move, the foliage doesn't move, there's no collision. So look at the animals that are running through the trees, nothing at all. Look at the way that the foliage pops in very, very close to your distance. All the same issues that have been, and I've covered before in the previous engines, it's exactly the same. You can see where they're culling very aggressively, the foliage, the shadows, the alpha sprites, the mist. It's all being cooled very, very quickly. They've got very low levels of light casting sources, so shadow casting light sources, I mean. They're not using anything other than just a light that then reacts to the normal maps on the characters. The BRDFs are very low quality. It's a dated and weak PBR-based material system, and it's not been moved and improved. In fact, you look back at the demonstration, again, that's much better PBR. And even the real-time cinematics don't really show that off. And in fact, in some ways, and this is quite drastic and quite scathing an argument, but look at Halo 4 on the Xbox 360. Look at the quality of the textures, the material quality, the detail on the lighting, the fake subsurface scattering like any game. Look at the details on an Xbox 360. Now, art design, composition and lighting is definitely a big deal here as well, and they have improved their animation and rigging system in their real-time cinematic. But in some key areas, the Slipspace demo looks better, the PBR materials are better, the world looks more organic, the shadow quality looks better, the movement is better, and it's nothing to do with the fact that it's got real-time lighting. Nothing at all. I would be absolutely astounded if there isn't a story to tell behind the fact that this has a very troubled and issue-riddled development period. That's what it looks like to me. And this looks like a very hurried demonstration to get something out. And Halo Infinite kind of gives them a free pass there, where they can just say, it's out there, there's chapter 1, there's a load of games, there's a load of online multiplayer, there's a load of single-player missions you can pick and choose as you want, but we're going to evolve the story, the graphics and the visuals over a period of time. And this is all about being a flagship for Game Pass, which is the real next generation. As I've already said, for Microsoft, this is what they're really pushing for. The GAS service, the SaaS service, that's the most efficient method for them as a company, and many other companies. Now, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with that. I think Game Pass is an excellent idea, but it does run the risk of later on, maybe not now, it becoming a part of Game Pass. You have to pay, otherwise you can't play the system, because it locks you into that ecosystem and keeps you perpetually paying over time. Not saying this is it, but it might be something they're evolving to. It's not all bad. Halo has never been a bad looking game, and this isn't. It's just dated. You know, the atmospheric scattering is very limited. The lighting is quite flat overall, and the art direction is now looking quite dated, and they do need to update it and amend it. More emissive textures, more specular, more glossy look on the materials. There's lots of things they can do to improve what we're seeing. Particle effects, alpha effects, post-processing, all those areas need to be improved. It's very lacking in post-processing overall. Some form of per object motion blur on the hands, the reloads and movement would be great. It's still got that same low quality dithered old PS3 style judder of motion blur which you saw in the previous games. You can see here on the real time cinematics. Those things need to be improved. There's just too many fundamental weaknesses in the game itself. It doesn't use any other than one single directional light source from the sun, nothing else at all. Explosions don't spawn any point light. Well, they do, but they're very weak and they're very limited and short-lived. There's a good example of my point right here with this very brief explosion with these very thick, opaque alpha effects, and then there's just a little flash of a point light at the top of the building there, and then it's gone. Totally gone for a second. Spawn it longer. Put area lights into the game to give a little bit of depth to the light quality. Add a few more shadow sources. Add muzzle flashes or plasma cannon flashes, just something to enhance the gunplay. Add some of those little elements would really enhance the visual look of this game. And in my humble opinion, do all those things before you worry about adding ray tracing, which is going to have a massive effect on both the performance and the resolution, way above what those other things are going to add. They absolutely have to change their PBR based systems, their BRDFs, their normal maps, their quality of the texture and the limited levels of geometry they're using. It's all geared towards an Xbox One and keeping a 60 FPS refresh rate. This is still the same engine targeted to do that. You're ramping up to 4K and 60 FPS on a far more powerful machine. You can't say that it's 4K that's doing this. I'm a big advocate to say that 4K is a waste of time. I've always said that for years. In fact, when I started the channel with Watch Dogs, I said that. But you still need resolution, you still need a clarity. If you've got a 4K screen, then you've got to be around the 1440p level. This isn't limiting this because it's 4K. This isn't limited by this because it's on Series X. This is on a PC. This should be on the fastest, most powerful PC you could possibly run this game on. Remember, this game is going to launch on PC as well. Was this simply the next Halo title on the Xbox One X and Xbox One, it would be incredible, everyone would be happy with it. That's really its problem. That's exactly what it really is. It's not really geared for the Series X at all. And just to reiterate, it's got nothing to do with open world games and lighting. I've just ironically covered Ghost of Tsushima with the lighting system in that, and that's got an open world system, image-based lighting, all those kind of elements. So please jump over to that video. I discuss more about lighting, materials, and all that kind of good stuff over there. So please jump over to that if you want to learn more about lights. This was a very scathing analysis of Halo Infinite, yes. Lots of other issues I could touch, lots of other areas I could discuss. I'm not going to drag it out. It's probably too long anyway as it stands. And there's not a lot else to cover from the show, but there was some great games shown here and some things that I'm really, really interested in. So I'm going to move on from Halo and move on to a company near and dear to my heart, and that's Rare. Now, Rare are one of the champions, I think, from Nintendo, and one of the biggest and best purchases that Microsoft made. And EVERWILD looks exceptional. The design, the imagery, the quality of what's being shown here is excellent. Silky, smooth and flowing animation, physics systems on cloth, superb colour tones and mapping, shadowing from multiple light sources here, depth of field used eloquently, fluid simulation on smoke, and that mixture of photorealistic elements such as the fur, the grass, mixed in with that cartoon aesthetic just blends perfectly. And again, it brings back that tone of their older titles when they're mixing two different elements, and it gives it a very unique aesthetic look that stands out from its peers, and that's what I've always liked about Rare. They're just like nobody else. Again, this will be Unreal Engine 4, so it looks superb. The problem with it is they themselves don't really know what the game's going to be. That's, again, a small problem. They're showing stuff very, very early, and this is going to be a next-gen title. It's not announced to run on anything else but Series X and PC, and that's likely because it's possibly going to be a couple of years out. But that's fine. I'll wait. It's worth the wait. It looks exceptional and unique, and hopefully they can bring back some of the quality of the classics such as Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, Donkey Kong Country, and way back when they were Ultimate Play the Game with things like Jetpack, Sable Wolf and Knight's Law. So they have a lot of heritage, and here they're really bringing that back. And Cameo was one of the standout titles of the Xbox 360, so maybe they can bring back that magic again here.
As a rhythm, we all sense it, but only a few truly feel it.
The next one is the next Forza Motorsport, and this will really be one that can show off the power and potential of the Series X, and obviously the PC cards that also support ray tracing. But again, the problem here was it's just an in-engine demonstration, and based on the fact that Halo's not been shown on the Series X, I highly doubt this is on the Series X as well. It's obviously target for what they're aiming for, so I'm not saying they're not going to achieve this, and there's ray tracing galore, and that's kind of what you would expect, just like we saw with Gran Turismo on the PS5. But unlike that game, it's running at 30 FPS here, not 60 FPS, but the reflections are of a better quality. They're physically based, they've got lots of noise filters and disturbance on the reflectors. The Fresnel's not quite accurate, but again, this is very early days, so I'm not quite sure how hard they're going to be pushing this in terms of ray tracing for the replays. Maybe again, not in the gameplay. In my opinion, it's a waste of resources. It was very light, it was very limited, and it almost certainly isn't running on the Series X, so we don't really know what it looks like. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There were a few other good games shown here. I think Gunk looks very good. It actually reminds me of a very old Sega Mega Drive or Genesis game made by the legend of Dave Perry, which was McDonald's Global Gladiators, cleaning up toxic waste and gunk. But rather than saving Earth, they're trying to save a distant planet and their bank balance out in space. Looking to earn a few quid, sucking up this gunk and selling it on the market, it becomes a rescue mission of the planet as it's being consumed by this black blob-like substance. I like the physically based lighting, I like the physically based objects, and the fluid based simulations. You suck up the gunk and that dynamic light as it creeps into the cave. It looks good, and actually it's quite a nice looking title that I'm hoping will have a good mixture of combat, platforming and adventure to create a modern twist on an old platforming adventure title. It's hitting all formats including Xbox One sometime later next year. One of two of the standout titles from the original reveal of the Series X titles was Scorn, and the other one was The Medium. Now, this third-person psychological horror game actually looks very impressive, and it is one of the titles that's really pushing the hardware, therefore it's not going to be a cross-gen title. Series X and PC only. We got a brief glimpse of it before, but real gameplay was shown here. Again, hopefully this will be exactly how it run on the Series X, but likelihood this is running on a PC again. But it does show the fact that they're pushing the hardware. Visual quality was all real and in engine. You got that duality of gameplay between the physical world and the spiritual world. And that horror mixture, that Silent Hill vibe is evident throughout the entire trailer. The fact that the game is actually rendering two worlds at once, that's actually quite impressive, and one of the reasons why it's running at 30 FPS and not 60 FPS. But that's, again, I've always touted this, that's nothing wrong with that at all. That's exactly what you should do. Let developers make the choices for their game. It's got nothing to do with us as the audience. And the reality is, as you're seeing here, and probably quite an extreme example, if you cut down on the frame times, then you improve what you can fit into that frame. And here, they're actually rendering dual worlds at the same time within engine. So that's one of the reasons why they're using that technique, and it's totally up to them. That's the gameplay decision. That's much better than just having a 60 FPS game, in my opinion, because it allows freedom of choice, and that's what we really want. The visual quality, the clarity, and the overall engine quality we're seeing here is very, very high. Great PBR-based materials, excellent animation, an intriguing concept with a very dark, foreboding look, and hopefully we'll get a good look at this later this year when it launches on PC and Series X, and it won't be long before we see what it looks like actually on the Series X, just to ensure that it is exactly the same as what we're seeing here. Probably the single biggest announcement from the show was that Sega was back with a new Sega Genesis. It was a Mega Drive. Okay, it's Phantasy Star Online. It's a great game. I loved this game back in the day on the Dreamcast. One of the first multiplayer, massively online titles that we all used to hook our 56k modems up and smash the internet, playing online with our friends, going back and forth between the station in the space and some weird and wonderful mission down on the planet. It's got the same look, vibe, and it's very, very Japanese in design. And again, I'm glad to see that it's been brought over here to the West so more people can get involved with some PSO. It's never bad. It's always fun. There were a few other collections of titles shown there as well, but probably the biggest one that really stood out to me as an impressive looking title was the long-standing PC hit in Crossfire X. Now, this title was announced actually last year, so it's not brand new at all, and it's been around for a while. Now, this was originally from the, I think it's a Korean company, Smilegate, that actually are making this game because it's one of their biggest games out in China. Like I say, it's a massive game over there. So they're bringing this over to Xbox One and I think PC as well. But They've also brought in the help of Remedy using the Unreal Engine 4. They're not using their own engine, and they're partnered with them to bring a single player element to the title alongside the massively online popular multiplayer element that's very much COD in design, a little bit more tactical, maybe Rainbow Six mixture. And those two elements have combined to a multiplayer and a single player game here. And again, it's all on Game Pass like everything here being announced, but the single player element is not. You notice that at the bottom of the screen. So you've got to be aware of that it isn't the same game playing on Game Pass. You will have to buy the single player element. Not too sure how that's going to shake out, how that collaboration has worked, but everyone knows how good Remedy are at creating great gunplay, great action. I mean, Max Payne was probably one of the pioneers of how we all get used to bullet time, admittedly taken from the Matrix, but in video game form it works perfectly. And Quantum Break was a standout title visually on the Xbox One. It still is, and this looks very impressive. 60 FPS on both Xbox One X, so it's certainly going to be 4K 60 on the Series X. Some good levels of destruction, pyrotechnics, great animation and combat that looks intriguing both from a single player and multiplayer element. It was one of the standout titles for me. I'm really looking forward to this. And that pretty much summed up the show. Yes, there were more games shown, but they were predominantly CGI trailers or in-engine trailers. Stalker 2 was a standout, a great title that I've seen come back from our past. And again, the in-engine stuff, that was real-time in-engine that they demonstrated, looks excellent, but we'll have to wait and see what gameplay and combat and all the kind of elements they're going to push into that game. So it's too early to analyse that, and that's the same for every other title. The only other one that I will talk about is one that I love and hold dear, and that's Fable. It was great that Playground Games' reboot of Fable is back on the cards. We knew it was coming, here it was announced, and it was great that with the fact that it was shown, even again it was only a CGI trailer. I hope that they don't go down the route of what the old Fable game, Fable Legends was, which you can see a glimpse of on here, again Unreal Engine 4. It was a decent attempt by Lionhead Studios, 1080p 30 FPS on the Xbox One using Unreal Engine 4. This title may use Unreal Engine 4, may even use Unreal Engine 5, but it's most likely going to be using Playground's own engine. That's what I predominantly think it's going to be shipping on, because that's perfectly suited to online open-ended games, and that's pretty much what Forza Horizon's been, so this would fit perfectly here. And it brings back that quintessential British humour, charm and comedy, mixed in that fairy tale, medieval adventure style, which I really like, and I hope that it brings back the magic of the original Fable on the Xbox. I hope it has that mixture between Monster Hunter World, where you actually play online or offline in a single player adventure and then choose to play online with more combats, more missions, more quests in terms of mixing that up. I hope that's the vibe they're going for. That will work, because that mixture of single player and online will work superbly, but we'll have to wait and see. And that's it, that's my view of the Xbox showcase. It was good, it could have been better, too many CGI trailers, and I think that they let themselves down by highlighting the whole show on Halo, and I don't think Halo was the best demonstration for what was predominantly a Series X focused show, and really most of the games were not Series X. It kind of really pushes forward that they're not looking at a new generation, they're looking at a continuation, as most of these games here were current generation with a mixture of next generation that's quite far out from when they're actually going to ship. It's not all doom and gloom, it is early days, we've got a lot more to look forward to, and hopefully you'll be checking out my channel as I dive deep into these pieces of hardware, how they run the games, what they look like, what they play like, and what the comparisons end up being, just as I did in this generation and the next. So please help by liking, sharing and supporting me. And you can also, if you want me to discuss more about the Halo and what it would look like, what it should look like, the things they can do in a little bit more detail, as I mentioned and alluded to at the start of this video, then please stick it in the comments below, or obviously hit me a message over on Twitter. Anyway, I'm out, but I'll catch you all very soon on the next one.